I came back from my morning walk on a Tuesday in March, and the first thing I noticed was the empty space beside the garage. For 31 years, that space had never once been empty. My truck was gone. For a moment I told myself I was confused, that maybe I had parked it somewhere else the night before. But I knew that wasn't true. I always parked it in the same spot, facing the gate, so I could check the tires every morning before my tea. I stood there in my sandals, my walking stick still in my hand, staring at a patch of oil-stained concrete where my truck used to sit. My name is Kareem. I am 68 years old, and that old pickup truck was the last thing my late father ever gave me advice about. He told me, "Kareem, take care of things that don't ask for attention. They are usually the ones holding everything together." I didn't understand what he meant back then. I understood it very well on that Tuesday morning. I need to go back a little, so you understand what that truck meant, and why what happened next changed everything in my family. I worked for 39 years as a supervisor at a textile mill. My wife, Ruxana, passed away 6 years ago, and since then I have lived with my son Bilal, his wife Sana, and their 2 children, in the house I built with my own hands in the early 90s. I never remarried. I never complained. I kept myself useful, fixing the neighbor's water pump, driving elderly widows to the hospital, picking up sacks of flour for the mosque during Ramadan. The truck was how I did all of it. It was a faded green 1994 pickup, dented on the left door, with a glove box that never closed properly, unless you knew the trick of lifting it slightly before pushing. Bilal is a good son in many ways. He works as a manager at a private company now, wears pressed shirts, and drives a silver sedan he financed 3 years ago. Sana is polite to my face, always polite, but I had noticed the way her politeness changed depending on who was visiting. When her own parents came, the house smelled of decoration and fresh paint. When it was just family, things were simpler, quieter, less important. The tension had been building for months before that Tuesday, the way tension always does, not in one big explosion, but in small comments that pile up until they become a wall. It started with the neighbors. Sana's cousin got engaged, and the engagement dinner was to be held at our house. Sana spent 2 weeks preparing. New curtains, new dinner set, a caterer from the city, and 3 days before the event, she stood in the kitchen with Bilal and said, loud enough for me to hear from the veranda, "Can we please ask Baba to park that truck somewhere else before people arrive? It looks like we run a scrapyard." Bilal didn't defend me. He just sighed and said, "I'll talk to him." He did talk to me, gently, the way you talk to someone you're trying not to upset. "Baba, just for the evening. Maybe you could leave it at Rashid Chacha's place down the road? People are coming, and you know how it looks." I said yes. I always said yes to things like this. I moved the truck. I told myself it didn't matter, but it kept happening. Every time there were guests, the truck disappeared to a neighbor's yard. Every time someone new came to the house, Sana found a way to mention that Baba refuses to get rid of that old thing, always laughing when she said it, always looking around the room for someone to laugh with her. Most people did. I sat quietly and let them. One evening my grandson Faizan, who is 11, came home from school and asked me, "Dada, Why do we still have your old truck? Ahmed's grandfather has a Prado. I didn't get angry. I just told him that some things are worth more than what they look like on the outside. He didn't understand. He was 11. I didn't expect him to. The worst of it happened at Faizan's own birthday party, in front of nearly 40 guests. I had gone out that morning to buy extra chairs, and when I returned, I parked the truck at the edge of the lawn, out of the way, near the hedge. During the party, one of Sana's colleagues, a well-dressed woman I had never met, walked past it and laughed to her husband, not realizing I was close enough to hear. Someone should tell them to get that thing towed before the photographer arrives. Sana overheard it too. Instead of correcting the woman, she laughed along, just for a second, just enough. Then she caught my eye across the lawn, and her smile disappeared. She didn't apologize that night. Neither did I ask her to. I simply moved the truck myself, quietly, before the cake was cut, and came back to smile for the photographs, as if nothing had happened. That was the moment I understood something had shifted in my own home. I was no longer just an old man with an old habit. I had become, without ever raising my voice, a small source of shame my family managed, rather than a father they were proud of. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself patience was still the right answer. But some nights, lying awake, I wondered if my father's advice, to protect the things that don't ask for attention, had quietly started to include me as well. 2 weeks later, Bilal sat down across from me after dinner, the way people do when they've rehearsed what they're about to say. "Baba, I've been thinking. That truck barely runs anymore. It costs money every few months for repairs. It's not registered properly anymore either." I checked. "Why don't we just let it go? I'll help you buy something smaller and easier. Something that suits, this stage of life." "This stage of life," I repeated. I didn't mean it like that. "I know how you meant it," I said, and I let the conversation end there, because I did not want to argue with my son in his own home. I should have said more that night. I know that now. But I have never been a man who raises his voice, and I believed, foolishly, that my silence would be respected the same way I had always tried to respect others. 3 weeks after that conversation, my old friend Anwar passed away in another city, and I traveled for the funeral. I was gone 4 days. When I returned, exhausted, carrying nothing but a small bag and a heavy heart, the space by the garage was empty. Bilal met me at the door before I even asked. His face already had the look of someone bracing for a storm he didn't think was coming. "Baba, before you say anything, I sold it. I know we didn't discuss the exact day, but we talked about this. A man came, offered a decent price for scrap, and honestly, Baba, it needed to go. Sana's cousin is getting married next month, and we can't keep having this same conversation every time." "Where is it?" I said. Just that, not a shout, just 3 words. "It's gone, Baba. The scrap dealer took it Thursday. He said he'd break it down for parts by the weekend." I did not sleep that night. Not because of the truck itself. Metal and rust can be replaced. But because of what was inside it, hidden in a place only I knew about. A place I had never told a single living soul, not even my late wife. Under the passenger seat of that truck, welded into a metal box my own father had built with his hands in 1968, were documents that represented almost every quiet decision I had made for the last 40 years. Let me explain, because this is the part of my life my family never knew. When I was 26 years old, my father called me to his room before he passed away and gave me a small brass key and an old ledger. He had spent his whole life as a mill worker, but he had also spent 30 years quietly buying small, cheap, undesirable plots of land on the outskirts of the city, land nobody wanted at the time because it flooded in monsoon season and had no proper roads. "Don't build a big house with this," he told me. "Don't show it off. Land like this takes patience. One day the city will grow toward it, and when that day comes, don't sell in panic. Sell in wisdom." I followed his instructions exactly. Every bit of overtime pay, every bonus, every rupee I saved instead of spending on new furniture or new clothes, I quietly put into that same land, adding 2 more small plots over the years, always in cash, always registered properly through a lawyer I trusted, always documented and kept safe, in that welded box under the seat of a truck nobody thought was worth looking at twice. I did this deliberately. I never told Bilal or Sana because I watched other families in our neighborhood fall apart the moment children learned their parents had money. Sons stopped visiting except to ask. Daughters-in-law became sweet overnight, then bitter again when the money ran low. I did not want that kind of love. I wanted the real kind, even if it meant being called poor, being called old-fashioned, being called a burden. Every few months, I would drive that truck out to the edge of the city myself, alone, telling my family I was visiting an old colleague. I would walk the boundaries of each plot, pay the small caretaker fees to the local farmers who kept animals from wandering onto the land, and update the ledger my father had started, adding notes in the same careful handwriting he had taught me as a boy. My lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Tariq, who had handled every registration since 1988, was the only person besides my father who ever knew the full truth. Even he did not know where I kept the documents. I never told anyone that. A secret shared with even one more person stops being a secret, and I had made a promise to my father that this particular one would only end when I chose to end it, not when circumstances forced my hand. But now that truck was in a scrapyard, about to be crushed for parts, with property deeds worth more than anyone in my family could imagine, hidden inside it. I did not tell Bilal any of this that night. I simply asked him for the scrap dealer's number and said I needed to speak with him about something I had left inside the vehicle. The next morning, I went to the scrapyard myself. My hands were shaking the entire ride there in a rickshaw, something that had not happened to me in years. When I arrived, I saw the dealer, a heavy-set man named Naimi, standing beside a pile of stripped car doors and bent axles. My stomach dropped, but then I saw it. My truck, still whole, parked at the edge of the yard, untouched. "You're lucky," Naimi said. "We had orders stacked up. Was going to start on it Monday." "You want to buy it back?" Naimi asked, squinting at me. "It's scrap price now. You'll pay more than what your son got for it." "I don't care what it costs," I said, and something in my voice must have told him not to bargain. because he simply nodded and told me to wait while he found the paperwork. I asked him, as calmly as I could manage, if I could sit inside it for a moment before he began. He shrugged and let me. I climbed into that familiar seat, reached under it exactly the way I had done for 40 years, and felt the cold metal box still bolted in place, untouched, safe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the small latch. For a terrible second I thought someone might have already pried it open, curious about the weight of it, but the lock held exactly the way my father had built it 58 years earlier. Simple, ugly, and completely dependable, just like the man himself. I bought the truck back that same day, for more than Bilal had sold it for, and I told Naimi nothing about why. I drove it home myself, slowly, my hands still trembling on the wheel, my mind somewhere between grief and disbelief. When I pulled into the driveway, Bilal came outside, confused. "Baba, you bought it back? Why would you spend money on this?" I didn't answer right away. I opened the passenger door, reached beneath the seat, and pulled out the metal box. I set it on the hood of the truck and opened it in front of him, in front of Sana, who had come out to see what the noise was about. Inside were the original deeds to 4 plots of land, all in my name, all fully paid, all now sitting on some of the most valuable undeveloped ground on the growing edge of the city. The same land developers had been trying to buy from smaller landowners for the last 2 years. The same land Bilal's own company had recently discussed acquiring for a new housing project. A fact I only learned later and found strangely fitting. Bilal picked up one of the papers, his hands unsteady, reading it twice as if the words might change the second time. "Baba, this is... How long have you had this?" "Since before you were born," I said quietly. "Your grandfather started it. I continued it. I never sold, never showed it, never used it to feel important. I kept it in that truck because I never once believed a piece of metal on wheels needed to look expensive to be valuable. I thought maybe, one day, you would understand that on your own. I didn't expect to have to prove it like this." Sana had gone very pale. She sat down slowly on the front step, her hand over her mouth. "We called it junk," she said, mostly to herself. "I told everyone it was an embarrassment. I did not say anything cruel. I did not use that moment to remind them of every insult, every comment, every time I had quietly moved the truck out of sight for their comfort. I had waited a long time to not need to raise my voice, and I was not going to start now. I'm not angry that you didn't know," I told them both. "I'm only sorry it took almost losing it for you to look closer. Some of the most important things in a family don't announce themselves. You have to choose to pay attention." In the weeks that followed, things changed slowly, the way real change usually does. Bilal came to me one evening and asked, for the first time in years, not for money or advice about work, but simply to sit with me while I checked the truck's oil, the way he used to as a boy, before life made him too busy for such things. Sana began greeting me differently, not performing kindness for an audience, but offering it quietly, the way it's supposed to be offered. Faizan asked if I would teach him to drive the truck once he was old enough, and I told him yes, on one condition, that he learn to respect it long before he learns to drive it. I never sold that land. I still haven't. Some of it, I've decided, will go toward Faizan's education, and some toward a small clinic in the neighborhood where I grew up, where children like I once was never had a doctor nearby. I told my family this plan openly, calmly, the same way my father once told me his. The truck still sits beside the garage. It still doesn't run perfectly. The door still doesn't close without a small trick you have to learn. But no one asks me to move it anymore when guests arrive. If anything, Bilal parks his sedan behind it now, and when people ask about the old green pickup out front, he tells them, with something like pride in his voice, "That belonged to my father. It's not for sale." I think about what my own father told me all those years ago, that the things worth protecting are usually the ones that don't ask for attention. I understand it fully now. Respect, like land, grows quietly if you're patient enough to let it. You don't have to shout to be valuable. Sometimes you just have to wait for the people you love to finally look a little closer.